At age 45, approximately $388,000 can be the point where your required future retirement contributions fall to zero. Under one transparent model, that portfolio compounds to $1.5 million by age 65, supporting $60,000 a year in retirement spending. The model assumes a 4% starting withdrawal rate and 7% annual growth after inflation. It assumes you leave the portfolio invested for 20 years without withdrawing from it. Reach that $388,000 threshold, and the model requires no additional retirement contribution from you. That is coast fire. It does not mean you can quit working tomorrow. It does not pay your mortgage, health insurance, groceries, or taxes today. It means the future retirement bill may already be funded, even though most of the money has not appeared in your account yet. And $388,000 only makes sense after you trace where the number came from. The retirement lifestyle in this example costs $60,000 per year in today's purchasing power. Divide $60,000 by a 4% starting withdrawal rate, and the full retirement target is $1.5 million. That 4% figure is a historical planning assumption, not a law of nature. We will test it later. For now, it gives us a visible destination. The next part is discounting that destination backward. $1 growing at 7% above inflation for 20 years becomes approximately $3.87 in real purchasing power. Divide $1.5 million by that growth factor, and you land near $388,000. No future deposits are needed in the calculation because compounding supplies the missing $1.11 million. Your portfolio does not grow in a smooth line in real life, but the equation reveals the mechanism. Time is doing more of the retirement funding than your future paycheck. That consequence is much bigger than the phrase "stop saving" makes it sound. If you were contributing $25,000 a year between age 45 and 65, reaching coast would make $500,000 of future contributions optional before considering any investment growth on those deposits. You could continue contributing. You might decide that extra margin is worth buying, but the purpose of every new dollar has changed. It is no longer required for the original $60,000 retirement scenario. The same destination produces a completely different threshold when you change your age, because the portfolio loses compounding time with every year that passes. If turning an uncertain retirement goal into an actual date is useful to you, I built a digital book called The Exit Code around that exact problem. It connects the coast threshold to a broader exit framework, and it is available through the link in the description. Now hold the $1.5 million destination still, and move the starting age back to 25. There are 40 years remaining. At 7% real growth, $1 becomes nearly $15. The coast number is approximately $100,000. That is only about 6.7% of the final retirement target. The other 93.3% arrives from 40 years of modeled real growth. The person did not earn $1.4 million from employment and move it into the portfolio. The capital already invested did the work. This is not a moral lecture aimed at anyone who was not sitting on $100,000 at 25. I certainly was not. The age 25 number matters because it exposes what time is worth. Compounding does not care whether the missing years disappeared because of low income, student debt, children, illness, or expensive mistakes. It applies the same arithmetic with the emotional sensitivity of a parking meter. At age 30, 35 years remain, and the threshold rises to approximately $140,000. 5 years cost $40,000 of required starting capital. The destination did not move. The retirement spending did not increase. The only thing removed was time. At age 35, the number reaches approximately $197,000. The age 35 investor needs almost twice as much as the age 25 investor because a full decade of compounding has disappeared. By the way, clicking subscribe helps a lot if you want more finance built from actual numbers rather than motivational fog, so thanks to everyone doing that. The movement from $100,000 to $197,000 is the pattern underneath this entire ladder. At 7%, money roughly doubles in real terms every 10 years. Lose a decade, and the portfolio required today nearly doubles because that missing doubling has to come from capital you already possess. Age 40 leaves 25 years. The threshold is approximately $276,000. That is still less than 1/5 of the $1.5 million destination. There is meaningful runway left, but the curve is getting steeper. Each lost year removes growth from a larger future balance, so the dollar penalty accelerates. Then we return to age 45, and the opening number, approximately $388,000. At this point, you need about 26% of the final target in the account. Compounding is still responsible for almost 3/4 of the destination, but it now has 20 years rather than 40. That is why the opening number can feel suspiciously low and surprisingly high at the same time. $388,000 is nowhere near $1.5 million, yet it is almost 4 times the age 25 requirement. Age 50 leaves 15 years, and the coast number rises to approximately $544,000. Now, the account must already contain more than 1/3 of the final target. There is enough time for growth to remain powerful, but not enough for a modest starting balance to carry the entire plan. At age 55, with 10 years remaining, the threshold is approximately $762,000. The portfolio has crossed half of the final target. $1 growing at 7% real for 10 years becomes about $1.97. Compounding can still almost double the account, but it can no longer manufacture most of the destination from a small base. That number is not a judgment on someone who reaches 55 with less. The equation measures remaining time, not discipline, intelligence, or personal worth. A later start may mean you need continued contributions, a different retirement date, lower spending, or some combination. It does not mean the entire plan has failed. At age 60, only 5 years remain. The coast number reaches approximately $1.07 million. 5 years of 7% real growth multiplies the portfolio by only about 1.4. You need more than 70% of the final target already invested. At that point, Coast Fire begins to resemble conventional retirement funding because compounding is running out of runway. The complete base ladder is $100,000 at 25, $140,000 at 30, $197,000 at 35, $276,000 at 43, $188,000 at 45, $544,000 at 50, $762,000 at 55, and $1.07 million at 60. You do not need to memorize those figures. The reusable idea sits in the decade markers. Approximately $100,000 at 25 becomes $197,000 at 35, $388,000 at 45, and $762,000 at 55. Every lost decade nearly doubles the required coast capital when the destination and 7% real return remain unchanged. That principle also explains why comparing your coast number with someone 10 years younger is financially useless and emotionally expensive. Their lower threshold may not reflect greater skill. They purchase more compounding time by arriving earlier. But age is only one input. The $1.5 million destination exists because we selected $60,000 of annual portfolio spending. Retirement spending is the engine of the target. Your current income is not. If you earn $200,000 but expect to spend $60,000 in retirement, the portfolio is not required to replace $200,000. If you earn $90,000 and expect to spend $70,000, a generic percentage of income rule may understate what your lifestyle requires. At age 45, reducing planned retirement spending from $60,000 to $50,000 lowers the full target from $1.5 million to $1.25 million. The coast number falls from approximately $388,000 to $323,000. Raise planned spending to $70,000, and the full target becomes $1.75 million. The age 45 coast number rises to approximately $452,000. A $20,000 difference in annual retirement spending moves today's threshold by roughly $129,000. This is why tracking actual expenses, is more valuable than arguing over whether you should replace 70%, 80%, or 90% of your salary. Your mortgage may disappear. Commuting may disappear. Payroll taxes may fall. Travel might rise. Healthcare might rise. Taxes on withdrawals still exist. If the $60,000 represents what you want available after tax, the tax bill belongs in the spending estimate. Calling the target $60,000 while ignoring another $10,000 of taxes does not make the taxes vanish. It creates a target that was wrong before the calculation began. The retirement date creates the next lever. For a 45-year-old using the original $1.5 million destination, retiring at 60 leaves 15 years, the coast threshold is approximately $544,000. Retiring at 65 leaves 20 years, producing the original $388,000. Moving the portfolio retirement date to 67 gives the money 22 years and lowers the threshold to approximately $339,000. That retirement date is a portfolio input. It is not the age when Social Security grants permission to stop working, and it is not the age Medicare defines as retirement. We will separate those timelines shortly. A later date lowers the amount required today because time resumes carrying part of the burden. An earlier date raises the amount because your current portfolio has to replace the growth years you removed. Now you can measure where you stand without comparing your salary, house, or car with anyone else. Add the investable assets genuinely assigned to retirement. Your 401k, individual retirement accounts, Roth accounts, taxable investments earmarked for the plan, and similar portfolio assets. Do not automatically include home equity unless the retirement plan contains a credible method for turning that equity into spendable capital. Do not count your emergency fund twice. A business valuation is not a retirement asset until there is a defensible path from valuation to cash. Divide that investable retirement portfolio by your relevant coast number. A result below 1.0 means you are below that scenario's line. 1.0 means you have reached it. A result above 1.0 means you exceed it. A 45-year-old with $500,000 invested has a base case coast ratio of approximately 1.29. The portfolio is about 29% above the $388,000 line. That ratio is more useful than knowing whether your neighbor owns a nicer kitchen. It compares resources with the retirement job those resources have to perform. Yet it is only a base case status. Before you make a permanent career decision from it, the assumptions need an audit. Up to this point, this looked like a retirement calculation. It is actually a calculation of when future saving changes from required funding to optional margin. That makes the number more useful, and it makes sloppy assumptions more dangerous. The fastest way to produce a falsely reassuring coast number is to mix nominal returns with spending expressed in today's dollars. You have probably heard that the stock market returns around 10% over long periods. That familiar figure is nominal, meaning inflation has not been removed. Our $60,000 lifestyle and $1.5 million destination are expressed in today's purchasing power. Apply 10% growth directly to that real target for 20 years, and the age 45 coast number collapses to approximately $223,000. That is $165,000 below the 7% real result. The calculator looks more exciting because the units no longer match. It is the financial equivalent of measuring the destination in miles and the remaining distance in kilometers, then celebrating because the number got smaller. If nominal investments rise 10% while prices rise around 3%, the gain in purchasing power is much closer to 7% than 10%. Taxes, fees, asset allocation, and the investor's actual behavior can pull the experienced return lower. 7% real is therefore a strong base assumption. It can be useful for understanding the mechanism, but I would not treat it as a guaranteed forecast delivered by the market on schedule. Reduce the real growth assumption from 7% to 6.5%, and the age 45 coast number rises from approximately $388,000 to $426,000. Half of 1 percentage point adds about $38,000 to the threshold. At 5% real growth, the required portfolio rises to approximately $565,000. That is about $177,000 above the base case. This is why I spend an unhealthy amount of time reading boring retirement papers and return assumptions. After more than 10 years running my own business around accountants and fiscal lawyers, and with multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested myself, I have learned that the dangerous errors usually appear where two reasonable-looking assumptions meet. Standard retirement advice often says to maximize the 401k, keep contributing, and wait until 65. That is easy to administer. It does not tell you when the original retirement saving job has been completed, or when continued saving is purchasing extra safety rather than baseline feasibility. Knowing these numbers and building a system around them are two different things. I built a digital book called The Exit Code because a calculated result does not tell you how to exit the rat race without replacing one fragile assumption with another. It is an analysis of 50 years of retirement data distilled into a mathematical framework that turns maybe someday into a specific date. The book examines the 4% trap and the dynamic withdrawal method that replaces rigid spending with rules that respond to the portfolio. It also covers the lazy portfolio and why long-term diversification has historically been more dependable than trying to trade every market prediction. You can get it for less than a dinner out through the link in the description. The point is not to create urgency around a book. Time already handles that. The point is to give the coast number a full operating system instead of treating one calculator output as a life plan. Return assumptions are only half of the audit. The $1.5 million destination depends on the 4% withdrawal assumption. William Bengen's 1994 research tested inflation-adjusted withdrawals against historical United States stock and bond returns. The Trinity study expanded this kind of historical testing in the late 90s. Together, that research helped popularize the idea of withdrawing about 4% of the initial portfolio and adjusting the dollar amount for inflation over a roughly 30-year retirement. It was never a government guarantee. It was a historical result built from specific portfolios, time periods, and spending rules. Morningstar's report, published in December 2025, estimated a 3.9% starting rate for fixed inflation-adjusted spending over 30 years using a 90% success target and forward-looking assumptions. Its estimate had been 3.7% in the prior report, 4% in 2023, and 3.3% in 2021. The movement does not mean retirement research is broken. It means the answer responds to valuations, bond yields, inflation assumptions, portfolio construction, retirement length, and whether spending can adjust. Using Morningstar's latest 3.9% rate, $60,000 requires approximately $1.54 million rather than $1.5 million. At 7% real growth, the age 45 coast threshold would be about $398,000. That is close to the base number, but you may want a deliberate cushion rather than the highest current estimate. At a 3.7% withdrawal rate, $60,000 requires approximately $1.62 million at retirement. Discounted back 20 years at 7% real, the age 45 coast number becomes approximately $419,000. At 3.5%, the destination rises to approximately $1.71 million. The age 45 threshold becomes approximately $443,000. Now, combine the cautious assumptions instead of changing them one at a time. Use 6.5% real growth and a 3.7% withdrawal rate. The age 45 threshold becomes approximately $460,000. The original answer was $388,000. The cautious answer is $460,000. Neither number is mystical. Each is the output of assumptions you can inspect. A more severe test, using 5% real growth and a 3.5% withdrawal rate, produces a threshold near $646,000. That gives you a coast band rather than a magic point. Roughly $388,000 under the base case, $460,000 under the cautious case, and $646,000 under the stress case. A 45-year-old with $500,000 is comfortably above the baseline and about 9% above the cautious line, but below the stress line. The appropriate line depends on how flexible the rest of your life is. If you can work longer, reduce discretionary spending, or resume contributions after a weak market period, the base or cautious line may be usable. If your retirement date is fixed, your spending is rigid, and returning to work would be difficult, more margin carries real value. Average return math has another limitation. Markets do not deposit exactly 7% above inflation every December. During pure coast years, with no contributions and no withdrawals, the order of returns does not change the final balance if the total compounded return is identical. Real life disrupts that clean setup. You may need to withdraw money. Your retirement date may arrive after a market decline. Your asset allocation may change. The cumulative return delivered over your particular 20-year period may be nowhere near the assumption. That uncertainty changes the buffer. It does not erase the threshold concept. You should also update the calculation rather than declaring victory once and refusing to look again for 20 years. Spending changes, families change, tax rules change. A cautious coast decision can be reviewed annually without becoming an invitation to stare at the market every afternoon. The word retirement creates another source of confusion because 3 different ages are regularly blended together. Age 65 is the portfolio date selected for our model. You can select 60, 67, 70, or another date. The latest Retirement Confidence Survey from the Employee Benefit Research Institute, released in 2026, found that workers expected to retire at a median age of 65, while retirees reported an actual median retirement age of 62. Social Security uses a different timeline. For people born in 1960 or later, full retirement age is 67. That is the age for an unreduced scheduled benefit, not an instruction governing your investment portfolio. Medicare eligibility remains age 65 for most people, which creates another separate boundary. If you include Social Security in the coast calculation, model its expected after-tax income and starting age separately. A benefit beginning at 67 cannot pay portfolio expenses at 65 unless you build a 2-year bridge. Subtracting future Social Security from every year of retirement without accounting for its actual starting date makes the coast number look lower by borrowing income from years when it does not exist. This is also why your coast number cannot be judged from median net worth. The Federal Reserve's latest completed survey of consumer finances remains the 2022 survey. It reported median family net worth of approximately $247,000 for households with a reference person between 45 and 54, measured in 2022 dollars. Our age 45 base threshold is $388,000 in today's purchasing power. But those figures are not an apples-to-apples scoreboard. Net worth includes home equity, vehicles, business assets, financial accounts, and debts. Coast status needs the investable portfolio that can perform the compounding job. A household might have $500,000 of net worth and only $150,000 invested. Another might rent, have lower total net worth, and hold $400,000 in retirement accounts. The median can tell you something about the economic environment. It cannot tell you whether your future spending is funded. If this distinction is helping you think more clearly about your own portfolio, subscribing is a small gesture that helps the channel keep doing this kind of research. So thank you. Now we reach the boundary that causes most of the confusion. Crossing coast does not make your present life free. It makes the retirement contribution attached to your accepted scenario optional. Your current expenses still arrive. Your health insurance still needs funding. Your taxes still exist. If your employment income disappears at 45, the retirement portfolio is not supposed to start supporting 20 additional years of living costs. Withdraw from it during that period, and the coast calculation changes immediately. You therefore may still need a job. You may not need the same job, income, hours, stress level, or saving rate. That difference is the entire value of Coast Fire. If your household previously needed $150,000 of gross income to cover current spending and $25,000 of annual retirement contributions, removing the contribution burden lowers the amount work has to produce. The exact gross income reduction depends on taxes and where the contribution was going, but the direction is clear. A lower required income can make part-time work viable. It can allow a career change with a pay cut. It can create room to build a business without asking the business to fund both current life and a distant retirement immediately. It can also let you remain in the same career while directing cash toward debt, a pre-retirement bridge, family, or experiences you had delayed automatically. Or you can keep contributing and use the excess to purchase an earlier retirement date, higher spending, a stronger healthcare buffer, or a legacy. Stopping contributions is not the prize. Having control over whether you continue is the prize. This is where the math runs directly into the brain problem. For years, you receive one repeated instruction: earn more, save more, maximize the account, do not fall behind. That instruction may have been correct for most of your career. Your brain then turns it into identity. You become the responsible saver. A contribution feels virtuous. Reducing it feels reckless, even after the reason for the contribution has changed. The spreadsheet may show 0 required deposits, while your nervous system shows a flashing red warning. Fear adds another layer. Future market returns are unknown, so another year of work appears to buy certainty. Then 1 year becomes 3 because certainty never arrives. A larger portfolio creates a larger dollar fluctuation, which can increase anxiety even when the percentage risk has not changed. Comparison keeps the machine running. Someone your age has more. Someone online retired earlier. Someone at work received another promotion. You begin optimizing against their visible result rather than your invisible spending requirement. Research on older Americans shows why money cannot explain every decision to keep working. Studies using the Health and Retirement Study have found that some retirees later re-enter employment, with healthier people more likely to return. Other research found strong willingness among older adults to keep working when jobs offered acceptable flexibility. That does not mean working longer is always voluntary. The 2026 Retirement Confidence Survey found that 48% of retirees left earlier than planned. Health problems or disability were the most common cited reason, followed closely by the ability to afford retirement and changes at an employer. The lesson cuts in both directions. You should not assume you will be able to work until your preferred date. You should not assume everyone working beyond that date is financially trapped either. Coast creates protection against the first problem and flexibility around the second. It also changes how you interpret continued work. Below your accepted coastline, contributions are still closing a modeled retirement gap. At the line, future retirement contributions can fall to 0 under that scenario. Above the line, additional saving purchases and upgrade rather than basic feasibility. That upgrade may be worth buying. The important part is naming it correctly. If you are 45 with $350,000, you remain below the base threshold, so contributions still have a defined retirement job. At $388,000, the base calculation reaches 0 required future contributions. At $450,000, you exceed the baseline, but remain slightly below the cautious $460,000 line. That is not mathematical purgatory. It tells you a modest amount of continued saving or additional market growth closes the cautious gap. At $500,000, both the base and cautious scenarios have crossed. Further contributions are purchasing margin, a change date, or a change lifestyle. This decision language is far more useful than calling yourself financially independent or not financially independent. Full financial independence asks whether the portfolio can fund your current life immediately. Coast asks whether the future retirement portion of the problem has already been handled. Those are different thresholds with different consequences. You can be Coast Fire and still need employment income. You can also have enough liquid money to leave a job for several years without being permanently financially independent. Combining Coast capital with a separate cash flow runway is often what creates practical career freedom. The retirement portfolio protects age 65 onward. The runway protects the transition before age 65. Asking one account to perform both jobs is how people accidentally spend the money that was supposed to compound. If the answer is a stronger buffer you genuinely value, continue. If it is an earlier date that matters to your family, continue. If the answer is fear without a defined financial improvement, price the year in time as carefully as you price it in dollars. You do not need to manufacture a dramatic resignation to prove the math worked. You can negotiate fewer hours, change roles, take more unpaid time, reject a promotion that would damage your life, or remain where you are with less fear of layoffs. The portfolio does not issue commands. It removes one of the constraints. This is also why an automatic contribution can become financially inefficient even while remaining emotionally comfortable. Once the baseline retirement target is funded, directing every spare dollar toward age 65 may leave you rich in the future and unnecessarily constrained in the decade you are currently living. The opposite mistake is treating the coast threshold as permission to inflate current spending permanently. If the lifestyle expansion follows you into retirement, the $60,000 assumption is no longer valid. Higher future spending raises the target and may move you back below coast. Freedom survives when the spending assumption remains honest. A useful approach is to select the coast band you can defend rather than the smallest number a calculator will produce. Label the assumptions. Update the spending figure. Separate current cash flow from future retirement capital. Then define in advance what crossing the line changes. Maybe contributions drop from $25,000 to $10,000 rather than zero. Maybe the difference funds a taxable bridge. Maybe you buy an extra day away from work each week. Maybe nothing changes until the portfolio remains above the cautious line for another year. The decision belongs to you because the threshold has converted an undefined fear into a measurable trade-off. The financial industry tends to measure success by assets accumulated. Employers measure success by continued productivity. Social comparison measures success by visible consumption. None of those systems is designed to alert you when your own portfolio has already purchased enough future time. That is mildly absurd. You can spend decades building an asset and never calculate what constraint it has removed. The coast number fixes that omission. For the 45-year-old targeting $60,000 of annual retirement spending at 65, the clean base answer is approximately $388,000. The more cautious combination of 6.5% real growth and a 3.7% withdrawal rate produces approximately $460,000. Cross whichever line you are prepared to trust, and the modeled future contribution requirement becomes zero. The date you cross is not automatically your retirement date. It is your choice date. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. The goal was never to stop working as early as mathematically possible. It was to reach the point where work no longer gets to make every decision for you. You are prepared to trust, and the modeled future contribution requirement becomes zero. The date you cross is not automatically your retirement date. It is your choice date. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. The goal was never to stop working as early as mathematically possible. It was to reach the point where work no longer gets to make every decision for you.